Thank you so much for joining us for CBN News Watch. I'm Ephraim Graham. Ahead today, the massive wildfires in Los Angeles being compared to Armageddon, destroying huge areas with at least 5 people dead, tens of thousands forced to flee from their homes. We're going to bring you a look at this historic devastation. Sad news out of the Middle East as the body of a hostage who had been thought to be alive is recovered. We're going to take a look at what happened and what it could mean for the hostage deal in the future. With Canadian Prime Minister Trudeau stepping down, is that country about to follow the lead of the United States and move to the political right? We're going to take a look. And using the winter weather to take a little break. All those stories and more today, right now on CBN News Watch.
This is CBN News Watch.
It's a busy Thursday, and we begin on the West Coast, where the wildfires tearing through Los Angeles are being compared to Armageddon. Firefighters are struggling to contain those dangerous blazes. So far, at least 5 people are confirmed dead, and tens of thousands have been forced to flee their homes. CBN's Brody Carter reports on the devastation and how area pastors, despite the heartache, are holding on to hope.
At least 5 major fires rage across Los Angeles, with new hotspots continuing to ignite. Despite the efforts of firefighters, the flames are ravaging entire neighborhoods.
When the sun was coming up, I came up here on my deck to see what was going on. And my first thought was just like, oh my gosh, this is the apocalypse. Like, it looks like a war zone or something.
Surrounded by smoke and flames, 25-year-old Kara Chafin, a Hollywood filmmaker, watches the devastation while waiting for evacuation orders.
We've just been evacuated. We've just been evacuated from this Good Samaritan's car. You got it, Dad. We're having to walk. This is crazy. There's a fire right outside our car.
Aaron Sampson and his 83-year-old father-in-law are among some 80,000 people forced to evacuate as fierce winds gusting up to 100 miles an hour fuel massive wildfires across Los Angeles County.
Call your friends in California. Make sure they're okay.
The wildfires have scorched more than 25,000 acres, destroying over 2,000 structures. Fire crews already stretched thin are battling additional challenges as low water pressure and dozens of dry hydrants leave some areas with no water supply.
It's knowing that God is still in control. His eye is still on the sparrow. He is still good in spite of earthquakes, famines, diseases, fires. That does not negate or qualify the reality of God's character and nature, that he is good.
With no containment in sight, Pastor Chad Veach of Zoe Church says his first priority is to grieve with his community.
I don't want to just bypass that moment and throw a scripture on it. You know, of course, we're ambassadors of hope. We are representatives of God's love. And I think we're just trying to navigate that as sensitively and as appropriately as possible. Insensitivity to a lot of people that are fearful and have lost their homes right now.
Sitting roughly 5 miles from the flames, Zoe's church building, which opened its doors in September, is safe for now. They're working with emergency teams like the LA Dream Center, led by Pastor Matthew Barnett, collecting emergency supplies to help those who've lost everything.
Pray that these fires are contained, because at this point there's zero containment. So we need some divine intervention here, and I think we can do what we all do best as Christians and pray for God's intervention.
Pastor Greg Laurie of Harvest Church has also set up a donation fund through his website while sharing his faith that the power of prayer still works.
We're just praying, Lord. You think of that time where Jesus looked at the storm on the Sea of Galilee and said, peace be still. We need the winds to stop. It would even be a little better if the rain came too.
CBN's Operation Blessing is gearing up to respond, connecting with local ministries to plan and coordinate relief for the victims. Brody Carter, CBN News.
Coming up, amid the ongoing pressure in Israel to see the hostages released, sad news as the body of a hostage thought to be alive was found this week. We're going to bring you the story from Jerusalem. We got the story for you when we come back. You're watching CBN News Watch.
Using a brand new way to start your morning. Get your daily quick start from CBN News. A quick read on the important news of the day delivered right to your inbox. Stay current on breaking news, politics, and entertainment. Discover how God is moving around the world and here at home. Plus, get exclusive stories and daily scripture encouragement just for you. Stay informed. Go to quickstart.news and subscribe today.
Welcome back to CBN News Watch. I want to turn now to the Middle East. The body of at least one hostage who had thought to be alive was found this week, adding new urgency to the talks for a hostage deal. That comes as negotiations for the hostage release seem to be moving forward for real. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl brings us that story. She's reporting from Jerusalem.
The IDF announced it recovered the body of Yosef al-Zayadna, a 53-year-old Bedouin Muslim who was abducted on October 7th and killed in captivity.
It's a very difficult incident. The family's in pain, crying and screaming. They received the news with deep sadness.
The IDF said it also located findings related to Yosef's son, Hamza, also a hostage, raising serious concerns for his life. Reports said the bodies of two terrorist guards were next to him. The mayor of Rahat, the Bedouin city where Yosef and Hamza are from, said they had different expectations.
We had all read the names of the hostages that were published, and they were among the names of the living ones. We expected them back alive. Unfortunately, it seems that they and others were murdered, and this is a great pain.
Al-Zayadna was abducted along with 3 of his children at the dairy in Kibbutz Holit.
At 7:30 in the morning, they were captured. We saw photos, footage, videos of them being held by Hamas. Very hard images, very hard footage.
Hamas released one son, Bilal, and daughter Aisha in an earlier hostage deal because they were both under 18. CBN News interviewed family member Bashir al-Zayadna last year, who described what his younger cousins experienced in captivity.
They told us that they had almost no food. They've told us that they have been staying deep down in the tunnels. They've told us that although the guards of Hamas spoke Arabic and they speak also Arabic, they never shared a word together, never spoke together.
In a statement, Israeli President Herzog said, "Our hearts ache over the immense tragedy of the Zayadna family who received the devastating news. They have endured 460 days of worry, hope, and endless longing." Prime Minister Netanyahu said he and his wife expressed deep sorrow over the bitter news and said Israel would continue to make every effort to return all of our hostages, the living and the deceased. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
And for more now, we're joined in studio by CBN Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell. So this man was thought to be alive, but sadly it turns out he is not. Do we have any idea how many hostages are actually still alive?
Well, right now it could be, we know that there's at least 100 there, now probably 98 with the discovery of these two bodies. There's been estimates of maybe 50 are still alive, maybe 60, but we really don't know for sure exactly. There are estimates by the IDF. You know, from the very beginning of this crisis, we talked to a Jewish rabbi, and he said, in Jewish tradition and teaching, one of the things that is so hard for a family is an abduction of a loved one, because there's, even with a death, there's some sort of closure. But with this situation, they just endure weeks, months, and now more than a year of suffering and wondering what's happening. And now we know, because of the hostages that have been released, we know how they've been treated. Many of the women have been raped, sexually abused. We heard, this family member said they had little food, and so the treatment is just horrific, and that just adds not only to the family's pain, but for the whole country.
Heartbreaking. Why would Hamas abduct Muslim captives?
Well, they would because they consider them collaborators. They consider them infidels because they're working with the Jewish people. And so even though they're Muslims, they can be abducted, they could be murdered, even if in this situation.
How long will Hamas keep holding on and not release it?
Well, they could hold on as long as they feel like their survival is at risk. They want two demands that really Israel doesn't want to accept. They want the IDF to pull out. They want a permanent ceasefire. And that goes in direct contrast to the 3 main goals that the Israeli government set out at the very beginning of the war. The first one was that they were going to defeat Hamas. The second one was that they would not allow Hamas to govern Gaza after the war was over. The third one was they were going to release all the hostages and get all the hostages freed. agreed. So there are two diametrically opposed agendas from Hamas and from Israel. And so it remains to be seen. Hamas is fighting for its survival just like Israel is. And so it remains to be seen exactly whether or not they're going to actually release all of the hostages.
How much can the Israeli government and the U.S. and other countries actually do to get these people released?
Well, it's very hard because they're burrowed, sometimes in these tunnels. Gaza is certainly much destroyed right now, so it's very hard to find the places that they can hide these hostages and try to get them out. So it's very, very difficult for them to go in. And now we have President Trump saying there's going to be hell to pay if the hostages aren't released. And we'll see exactly what that means, but that would add some pressure, presumably, upon not only Hamas, but the mediators, Qatar and Egypt, that are trying to manage this transaction. Qatar in particular, Ephraim, and I know we mentioned this before, had been the sponsors of Hamas. So I think the U.S. pressure on Qatar would be probably one of the main things that could actually put pressure on Hamas to release the hostages. One other point is that the fact that part of this deal is that Palestinian prisoners would be released in any deal. And there's been a report that mainly in the last hostage negotiations, the Palestinian prisoners that were released have been responsible for literally hundreds of terror attacks. So it's a dilemma for Israel. They want the hostages, but when they release prisoners as well, that puts more people at risk.
Indeed. The Gaza Health Ministry said today the death toll from the Israel-Hamas war is now more than 46,000 Palestinians, although it doesn't distinguish between civilians and fighters. Are these figures basically from Hamas, and how reliable are they?
I don't think they're reliable at all. From the very beginning of the war, it was the Hamas-run Ministry of Health that was the ones that were releasing these numbers. And what happened was that the world's media, in particular, sort of ran with these numbers. Associated Press, BBC, CNN, sort of took these as gospel. However, there's been a lot of research into these numbers. First of all, they don't distinguish between civilians and terrorists. Out of that 45,000, they're estimating maybe at least 17,000 Hamas terrorists. They also don't distinguish what people naturally die. They include those people in the surveys, and that could be as many as 5,000. And then if you look at the list, they've found that there are duplicate numbers, and that eliminates maybe another 5,000 or so. So if you look at the number of actually deaths in Gaza, and I think when the war's over, we'll find this out more specifically, it's far less than 45,000 or what Hamas has been telling the world.
Real quick, and the motivation for inflating numbers would be?
Well, the propaganda. It puts the onus, it demonizes Israel.
Indeed. Our CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief, Chris Mitchell, thank you always for your insight. Good to have you here in studio today. Still ahead, is another country about to move to the political right with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau resigning? Will a conservative take his place? We're going to take a look right after this. Welcome back to CBN NewsWatch. Now that Justin Trudeau has announced he will step aside as Canada's Prime Minister, the question is, who will succeed him? In this week's episode of the Global Lane, Alberta attorney Enlighten Gray, host of the Gray Matter podcast, predicts that just as the U.S. did, Canada will shift to the political right.
Without doubt, our next Prime Minister, within a very short time, is going to be Pierre Poilievre, who is the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada.
And that'll probably take place before October?
We're hopeful. The election is supposed to take place by October at the latest. However, most pundits are predicting that we're going to have a spring national election in Canada, and I certainly hope that we will. I think we need it. We need to clear out these Liberals just as badly as Americans needed to clear out the Democrats.
So, Leighton, what do you expect Canada will do then to avoid these tariffs that Trump has threatened?
Well, this is interesting because I happen to think that the approach that's being taken by Trump and the MAGA movement, if I can call it that, United States, is much deeper than just the tariffs. I see the tariffs as sort of a boots-on-the-ground manifestation of a deeper plan. I had the privilege of attending a Trump rally in Henderson, Nevada, right before the election, and it dawned on me that MAGA is something much more than a political movement. I see it as a Made in America response to globalism. And I think that it's catching fire throughout the world. If you saw the way the people in as far away as Japan and Serbia and Hungary and of course right here in Canada reacted to Trump's victory, I think you can see that the tide is turning against globalism, against the idea that we need to destroy 7/8 of the Earth's population, destroy all of our energy, and drive most people in the middle class into abject poverty. I think these are ideas that are being roundly rejected, especially in the West. And I think that these tariffs are really the least of Canada's problems. I think that the message that Mr. Trump wants to send to Canada and other close trading partners is, look, you need to get on board with the movement, which is MAGA, and it's much more and it's much deeper than just economic policy, in my respectful view.
Well, I must point out that Canada is the number 2 trading partner of the U.S., right behind Mexico and ahead of China. So yes. Donald Trump now calls Justin Trudeau governor. He suggested that Canada become America's 51st state. Is that all in jest or a serious consideration?
Well, it certainly is something that has been in consideration in America for a very long time, going all the way back to the Founding Fathers. In fact, there always has been a contingency plan about expanding the United States into Canada. It hasn't made sense over the past century or so. I think that the 2 world wars kind of forestalled that, and then we got into the Cold War with the Soviet Union and the Soviet bloc. But in the aftermath of that, I would say over the past 30 years, since Mr. Reagan left, I think that the situation in Canada has declined to the point where many Canadians are asking, well, gee, why are we an independent country? What are the benefits of that? Our standard of living used to mirror pretty closely the United States, but now even the richest parts of Canada would be behind states like Mississippi in terms of GDP and standard of living. And so I think that this is a time when it behooves us as people and indeed our leaders to look at all options, look at all possibilities, to do what's best for the citizenry and not necessarily for those who happen to have the privilege of governing us.
Well, Leighton, I don't need to tell you. I mean, Canadian provinces are split, very diverse. If you look at the Maritimes, Quebec, which over the years has had a secessionist movement, and the western states are all very different. So I don't see joining the U.S. as something that would happen to you.
It's a serious question. It certainly could, under certain circumstances. We could also have a situation where certain provinces which are more quote unquote American in the way that they behave and the way they govern themselves, for example, Alberta and Saskatchewan, who have very close political and economic ties to the U.S., they might want to join or at least have a very close association, almost borderless in nature. Borderless in a good way, not borderless in terms of not paying attention to the border, but borderless in terms of not having tariffs and having free trade, which benefits all parties. So these are things that I think need to be looked at closely. The question of Canadian sovereignty is one that has dogged us from the very outset. And this gets into a deeper discussion of Canada, what Canada is all about. But what Canada lacks as a nation is a sort of a uniting event. And America has a couple of really big ones. There's that revolution. And of course, there's the Civil War, which arguably was a second revolution. These are uniting points that really speak to Americans in terms of who they are and what they stand for and what their culture, what their country are all about. Canada has not really had those types of seminal events historically. And so there's always been a serious question in Canada in terms of uniting the country under guiding principles.
Also on this week's episode of The Global Lane, diabolical sabotage. Key U.S. government officials may be acting to thwart the efforts of the incoming president. And was the Las Vegas Green Beret bomber right when he wrote in his suicide note, "America is terminally ill"? If so, what is the best way to turn things around? You can see it all on The Global Lane this evening on the CBN News Channel. It begins at 8 Eastern. You can also see it on the CBN News app, or you can watch on YouTube. Coming up, using the winter weather along the East Coast this week to take a little break. We're going to bring you the story when we come back.
The CBN News app, 24/7 news from a Christian perspective at home or on the road. One place for all of your news. Breaking news alerts. Set daily prayer goals and pray for news stories. Read the most important news and watch CBN News Channel live. CBN News, because truth matters. Go to cbnnewsapp.com to get the app today.
And finally today, a unique way to enjoy a snow day. After heavy snowfall blanketed the East Coast, some people decided to make the most of it. In Washington, D.C., two-time Olympian Claire Egan strapped on her skis and took a spin around the National Mall.
I just moved to Washington, D.C. in the fall, so I thought my skiing days were maybe behind me, but this is awesome. Best snow day ever.
In Ohio, where some parts of the state received as much as 8 inches of snow, a man had the very same idea, most likely getting around town better than most cars. What a sight. Well, time now for your Thursday Thankful, and I invite you to join me in this prayer of gratitude. Father, I thank you for the gift of wisdom. I asked for her, and you give freely. I value her far more than anything else. Thank you for wisdom. And with that prayer, I encourage us all to walk in gratitude today. Wisdom tells us to do it because it is wise to do so. Well, that will do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. You can always find more of our news programs on the CBN News Channel. You can find them there at any time as well as online. That address is cbnnews.com. Take a moment. Let us know what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can email us, newswatch@cbn.com. We'll see you tomorrow.